Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
The German government fined Facebook over $2 million for underreporting the amount of illegal content like hate speech on its platform. German authorities say there were more complaints about anti-Semitic content than Facebook let on in a recent transparency report. The fine itself is small, given the company's size. It draws attention, however, to the embattled social media giant's clashes with other world powers as the growing threat of hate speech emerges as a topic of debate within governments across the world. We reached out to Facebook for comment, but we have not heard back. Joining me now is Rashad Robinson, the president of Color of Change, which is the nation's largest online racial justice organization. He's met with Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, over a dozen times to discuss the issues facing the company. Rashad, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
There's a context in Europe, particularly in Germany, where as a result of the Holocaust, they are hypersensitive toward hate speech and the degree to which it can catch on. It does seem that the Europeans are further ahead than Americans are on dealing with this issue.
Absolutely. I mean, they are, the fine, as you said, is small, but the symbol of the fine, the symbol of holding an institution like Facebook accountable is serious. And unfortunately, we have not had that level of oversight from the FTC here, from Congress, from the authorities that are supposed to be stepping in when institutions, communications platforms, others do not live up to their standards.
Why do you think that is?
Well,
is it a will thing? Is it an understanding?
It's a couple of things. Well, first of all, it is certainly a will thing. It's a will thing when it comes to Congress. It's become politicized on both sides. And I don't want to create false equivalencies, right, because the Republicans have controlled the levers of power and could have stepped in after the 2016 election and done a lot more. But the FTC lacks the type of teeth that it needs. And so what we've seen is them sort of win settlements or get fines and be able to sort of implement or hold accountable once Facebook then goes back and violates some of the things that they were called out on in the first place.
All right, so you have had conversations with Sheryl Sandberg. In fact, she's put out, she's had something to say about the census coming up, that Facebook wants to play a role in ensuring that the census is completed properly. And one wouldn't have thought that's a problem, except that in our world of misinformation, you can imagine people putting false news out about the census and that somehow messing up the count.
Yes, you cannot fill out your census on Facebook. But to that point, this was part of a long-term work we've been doing at Color of Change. For the last, several years, we've been pushing the organization to get really clear about their civil rights work. And back in November, we got them to commit to publicly releasing their civil rights audit. And they did the first phase in December, which was really weak. It didn't actually list sort of the structural things. This last phase that they released on Sunday showed some more progress. Since Sheryl Sandberg has taken over the audit and put it under her office, we have seen a marked change in their commitment to actually trying to solve these problems. For us, though, the metric of success is a different type of experience. But as part of that, we wanted them to really dig in, not just into how they were going to deal with this upcoming election, but how do they treat the census like an election as well, as a big event where all sorts of forces are going to try to come in because there's a lot at stake, and influence it, use racial appeals, use other things to try to suppress turnout, to try to suppress participation. And so part of this is that Facebook makes a lot of money. It's the largest communications platform in the world, and they have a responsibility to make sure that the technology that moves us into the future doesn't drag us into the past.
All right, so let's talk about this investigation that's been ordered by the head of the Department of Homeland Security into the secret post that had almost 10,000 people on it, in which they were saying remarkably sexist, misogynist, racist things about members of Congress, about migrants. Look, it's 10,000 people. We do not mean that to taint the good work of those people in Customs and Border Patrol who are not involved in it. But talk to me about how you think about this. This is a secret group. We only found out about it because somebody in it leaked this information because they thought it had gone too far. Does Facebook have a role in that?
Yeah, Facebook does have a role in it, because Facebook, these private groups, they mine the data. And then they mine the data, and then they work to make money off of that data. And so they've created these private groups, and then they have community standards about hate, about what you can say and what you can do on their platform.
And that applies even if your group is private?
It should. It does apply even if it does. And it needs to apply no matter how powerful the people who are doing it are. It doesn't, it's the trick here is like, it's okay to have traffic rules, right? Yeah. But the traffic rules only matter if they apply to all of us. And the fact of the matter is that these private groups can exist on their platform and then allow for the type of sowing and creation of hate, and then nothing happens. And so Facebook has a role in this. I also think that the government has a role in it. The fact that people felt so comfortable in a space, law enforcement figures that get a gun and a badge and are supposed to uphold the laws of this country, felt so comfortable as to say some of the most hateful and derogatory things about people in peril and elected officials of color and women, and felt like they didn't, because there are 10,000 people in the group.
They didn't have a Facebook group. In other words, did Facebook make them say these things? Because these people had racist, sexist, misogynist things to say. So do we win if we get it off of Facebook?
No, but I think that we have to recognize the ways that technology and new tools allows for this thing to for these information to move quicker, right? It's like taking lighting a match is one thing, lighting a match next to lighter fluid is a different thing. And in many ways, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, these platforms can be the lighter fluid. And so that means that we have to keep an eye on it, and we have to pay special attention to how this information can spread in different ways. Yes, someone can say hateful things out on the street, and that's freedom of speech, and they, not without consequences for their job or the workplace or whatever, but it's freedom of speech. It's different when you go into a group, you are a law enforcement figure, you don't know the other 10,000 people on that group, and you feel so comfortable saying these things and doing these things. Yes, there has to be accountability.
It is Friday, the 5th of July of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Indeed. Well, the French 77s are, they're poured and ready for you to imbibe. We start early today. Indeed, it was quite a day yesterday. Oh, it rained on his parade. Darn. But that's okay. He was in a rain-splattered plexiglass bubble, which means he was perfectly at home. So he was having a grand old time, smiling, just, giving a history lesson of history that no one has ever they're still trying to figure out what history he was historicizing about. Apparently the Brits had airports back during the Revolutionary War that were actually ours to begin with. So, I don't know. I'm waiting to hear if the Continental Space Force took some of the Brits' satellites. Maybe. They may have. And the Minutemen, I'm sure, protected most everything along the eastern seaboard. And why wouldn't they? Of course, I'm trying to make a really obscure joke about Mike Watt and the others in the Minutemen, the punk rock group whose initial claim to fame was being able to play a song in about a minute. Thus, the Minutemen. Yeah, so, I celebrated Independence Day by being independent of Trump's attempt to stroke his ego. Read about it on social media. Now, there were some baseball games all day that were perfectly fine to have on in the background. In fact, there was the beginning, as there usually is this time of year, on Thursday, the beginning of another golf tournament that's always good to have on in the background, even with the sound down. So I didn't even really have to consider what was going on with Trump. There is some sort of argument, I'm not delving too deeply into this, that purports that Trump's crowd size was photoshopped. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not going to get into that. All I know is that from people that I know who were there, the party on the Capitol Hill, yeah, way bigger than Trump's over there in the Lincoln Memorial, which he had fenced off anyway. He fences off the Lincoln Memorial and he fences off the reflecting pool and only lets VIPs in. People who are MAGA hatters. There's only so many of them, apparently. Though there were around 60 million who showed up a few years ago and got this guy into office, their numbers seem to have precipitously dropped right back down to their toxic 1/3. I mean, they began as 1/3 of the population to begin with. Now they're down to the 1/3 of the 1/3. What does that make it? I know I'm not going to count. So, we got that going for us, which is, I don't know how nice that is. All right. Well, he's in a steep decline. There are some actually who purport that it's a body double and Trump is not around anymore, and that's why Pence flew so quickly in an emergency state to the White House, and no one knows why Pence did that. And now look at what's going on. Oh, as an aside, apparently there's another argument about the Trump women, like Melania and Ivanka, showing a lot of nipple because they're against bras, and how dare we libertine liberals point something out like that? I mean, didn't we burn bras? And of course, it's not about the bras, it's about the hypocrisy. It's just another aspect of the hypocrisy. Of course, I mean, Fox, the whole Fox channel is steeped in hypocrisy. In one division of the Fox empire, we'll call it the news division and news opinion division. They bemoan the libertine liberal. They bemoan the destruction of the morals and the mores of our society. It's just fallen so low. It's so classless. You know why they got some leggy blondes showing a lot of nipple without any bras, And that's in the news and the news opinion division. And then you go to their programming and it's the most lowbrow, titillating programming around. And so we're talking about hypocrisy here. We've already seen Fox News for, several decades now. Yeah, I know Married with Children was supposed to be like, a watershed moment in TV history. Yeah, it sure was. But it's lowbrow. All of it is lowbrow. Fox markets in lowbrow. And it's fun to laugh at the lowbrow. I know. But there are some people who actually believe it. Okay? There are some people who don't know why certain cartoons, for instance, like say like The Simpsons. There's a whole segment of political types who don't understand why The Simpsons are, is funny. Or was funny. I think The Simpsons is still on. I never watch it. And that's because when your life is being described so literally, it doesn't seem like a joke now, does it? Family Guy, that was another one. But I know lots of a segment of the political spectrum that this does not find Family Guy funny. I think Family Guy's still on. I never watch it. But the Family Guy show describes very succinctly a particular segment of the political spectrum. And to that spectrum, it doesn't seem like a joke. It says, okay, they're describing my life. Why is that funny? I mean, doesn't everybody repurpose a toilet into you put the tank, you got the tank, so make that into a cooler for your beer, and you got the bowl, make that into a barbecue. Put a grate over it, make that into a barbecue. You just throw the briquettes in there, and when the briquettes are done, you just flush them out the bottom. Is that the America we really want? I know that's the America we got. But is that the America we really want? Well, let's declare our independence from all that and look at what's happening today, right after the 4th of July. We call that the 5th of July, by the way. And it being a Friday, you might as well buy a 5th and get it over with. Come on. Yeah, just, have some fun. It's the weekend. It's a very long weekend, by the way. Well, starting off here in the Bistro Cafe, Germany penalized Facebook for underreporting hate speech. Now, if we could do that here, like secret Border Patrol Facebook groups who talk about killing. Oh, good. We get to round up a bunch more Jews and throw them into the death camps. Yeah, I mean, that's essentially where we are, folks. When I read the posts in our local Facebook group talking about those people, why don't they just go, if it's so bad in Guatemala and Honduras, why don't they seek asylum in Mexico? Well, because they don't have the same asylum numbers that we do. Do you get that? No, they really don't understand that we are reaping what we sowed. You try to explain to them, I guess trading guns for hostages, selling, missiles and whatnot to Iran and the terrorists, and then setting up drug cartels in Latin America so you could install right-wing governments. I don't think that turned out very well. You talk to a certain segment of the political spectrum who supports this guy in the White House. First of all, they have no idea what you're talking about. The Iran hostage crisis? What was that? Yeah. How soon they forget and how little they've ever been taught. Continuing on here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a measure that bans schools and employers from discriminating against wearing natural hairstyles. We're not talking about, long hairs, hippies. We're talking about black people, particularly black women. The FBI said it conveniently lost all the files of the white nationalist hate site Stormfront. How convenient is that? All the files. Wow. Now, there's some that argue that, there's a continuing investigation. Of course, they don't want anyone to know that they've been investigating Stormfront. Okay, yeah, I believe that. And the American Revolution shows how sad and thin Trump's vision of the country is. Because the American Revolution was born from the minds of men, and mostly men, of the Enlightenment. But I should say it was truly the women who drove it. Let's be clear. And after the break, we then move to the chef's table where an enforcer of Duterte's Philippine drug war shrugged off the police killing of a toddler. I expect Duterte to be invited to the White House soon. And the leaders of Israel and Serbia have perfected the politics of persecution, but that strategy won't keep working. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page, well, there's a scroll of social media, mostly Twitter. And right near that is the chat room link. So you can engage there and also on social media. We got both of those covered. Kelly Lincoln takes care of the chat room link, and we thank her profusely. Yes, we do. Thank you, Kelly. And also, she will be at Netroots Nation this year, manning the table at on Radio Row. So look for our banner if you happen to be at Netroots Nation and say hi. Though she might also be out and about securing interviews and taking in the talks and then reporting on the experience like we do every year. Indeed. Thank you, Kelly. If you look to the leftish of the page at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right there is the link to our Patreon site. And though all kidding aside now, though this concern that we have here called Netroots Radio, it is funded mostly by what we're able to grab out of our own pockets. We really wouldn't be able to do it without you, because you are our largest contributor. You really are, and thank you. So if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you will be instrumental in fulfilling, well, we got to tell you, it is your patriotic duty to continue helping Resistance Radio resist, as we have 24/7, 365 for the last 8 years. We like to think that we're the hardest working Resistance Radio, well, out there. We do. And so your generosity has allowed us to do that, and your generosity will continue to allow us to do that, and we thank you profusely as well. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, so you can see it over on that scroll over there by the chat room link, Tom takes care of that on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and get those links out on social media in that, what we call in the business, the scramble period. Yeah, that 10 minutes before showtime. It's always a scramble period. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Okay, and you know this with every single podcast in the world, but I like that. Fine podcasts. Okay. One little note here, personal note. We had that Daily Co's Art Expo yesterday, and I'll get a link up to that on the show notes and links diary, probably after the what we call in the business the scramble period, maybe during the break, because I realize I don't have a link up to it right now. But I will put a link up in the show notes and links diary to the Art Expo. There is some stunning work by people there. And I feel very proud to have been included in some small way. But do check them out. A lot of them have the ability to purchase their works, and you should. There's some great works there. All right, so do check that out. Also, I heard that Tortmaster and Gwynedd will be putting links up on some of the other community diaries as well over the weekend. So look for all of that, and it's quite lovely, and this could be an occurrence every year, and who knows, maybe, remember when it used to be called yearly co's? Maybe we'll get those again, and we'll have an actual art expo on site. That would be fun. Okay, let's look at this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It's not only the day after the 4th of July, it's Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Stephanie Griffith of Think Progress brings us this first offering here. Employers in California no longer will be allowed to reject job candidates because they dislike their curls, coils, kinks, or locks, after the governor signed a first-of-its-kind bill outlawing hair discrimination. Yeah, I know. There's going to be a lot of right-wing governors across the country who just cannot stand anybody having, I don't know, freedom of expression and liberty and justice. And they're going to call this socialism. I don't know what it has to do with socialism, but apparently socialism is some kind of dirty word to them. They think it's a dirty word. The new measure, signed by Governor Gavin Newsom, who happens to be a Democrat, by the way, bans discrimination against a job candidate or school applicant for wearing natural hairstyles. There's a human element to this. We don't want to diminish people. We don't want to demean people. We have to own up to the sins of the past, Newsom said. I hope that folks are paying attention all across the country. And yeah, there's a certain autocratic demagogue who says, own up, apologize. That is a show of weakness. If you show humanity, you are weak. And apparently that gives them the right in their mind to grind you under an iron boot. Well, the heel, iron heel. I don't know, maybe the boot, all of it could be iron. The whole iron boot. Let's call it the iron boot. All right? Yeah, Jack London. The bill was approved unanimously in both the California House and Senate, and that means that even the few Republicans who are allowed to, I don't know, take part with their mealy-mouthed little, politics of victimization. Yeah, it's rampant. Even they voted for it. The text of the measure states that throughout its history, the United States has been riddled with laws and societal norms that equated blackness and the associated physical traits, for example, dark skin, kinky and curly hair, to be a badge of inferiority, sometimes subject to separate and unequal treatment. Let's put some acid on your scalp, straighten your hair, lighten your skin with some more acid possibly, and maybe we'll give you a job as a secretary somewhere. Maybe. The issue is a particularly fraught one for African Americans who have been expected to style their hair to conform with Caucasian norms of beauty or acceptability, especially in the workplace. Professionalism was and still is closely linked to European features and mannerisms, which entails that those who do not naturally fall into Eurocentric norms must alter their appearances, sometimes drastically and permanently, in order to be deemed professional, the text of the legislation said. Now, I can see and hear a certain segment of the political spectrum who happens to be really virulently white, who will claim that this is part of the white genocide. If they can't force a black woman to put acid on her scalp and acid on her skin to conform with the norms of beauty as defined by that virulent white group, that must be white genocide. Fenwick of Alternet brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The FBI told reporter Emma Best that it has lost or could not find its records on the white nationalist hate site Stormfront. Best had requested the records through a FOIA act, which is kind of redundant because FOIA has act as the last word as A in FOIA, and I just said it twice. But the Bureau only returned 104 pages of files. It believed there were more records to find. For your information, a search of the indices of our central record system reflected there were additional records potentially responsive for your Freedom of Information Privacy Act request. We have attempted to obtain this material so it could be reviewed to determine whether it was responsive to your request. We were advised that the potentially responsive records were not in their expected location and could not be located after a reasonable search. Wink, wink. Following a reasonable waiting period, another attempt was made to obtain this material. This search for the missing records also met with unsuccessful results. Why, that's very convenient, in this reporter's opinion. You know, convenient in the Vlad sense, I would put. It's not clear how extensive a reasonable search has to be, so it's difficult to assess if the materials are truly lost, or as the reporter of this article states, just inconveniently stored. I would say it's conveniently lost. Now, some members on Stormfront were gleeful in response, suspecting that an ally in the Bureau buried the files. They would expect that because there probably are. But a review of the forum showed that many of the hate site users seemed shocked that the Bureau would have any interest in Stormfront at all. Some suspected that the failure to release the files may even be an attempt to hide the extent to which the Bureau is monitoring the site. Oh, I wonder what Q might say about that. Combating white supremacy has long been part of the FBI's mission, even while it also targeted civil rights leaders in the past. Director Christopher Wray said it poses a persistent, pervasive threat to the U.S., and the Bureau has recently found an increase in the white supremacist domestic terrorism, but critics have said that Trump's administration has made it more difficult to fight the danger this ideology poses. Here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays comes out of the op-ed section of the LA Times by J.M. Opal. On July 4th of 1970, President Nixon tried to claim America's birthday for his silent majority by hosting an Honor America Day in Washington, D.C. It didn't go well. Crowds of Nixon supporters clashed with anti-war demonstrators. Hippies swam naked in the reflecting pool, and the bitter divisions of that era ruined what has traditionally been a star-spangled but lighthearted day for hot dogs and baseball. After nearly half a century of nonpartisan Independence Day, Trump took a page from Nixon's playbook by hosting a 4th of July Salute to America rally Hold the date, he tweeted earlier this year, promising a major fireworks display, entertainment, and an address by your favorite president, me. Wow. We can also expect a story about the American Revolution that sounds much like the one featured in 1970. A narrative of our country's founding that underpins Trump's politics just as it did Nixon's. You heard it before. The story begins with a group of virtuous colonists who began to protest King George III's taxes and regulations. Eventually, they had to do battle, producing two great documents along the way. One was the Declaration of Independence. That was released on July 4th of 1776 to inspire the new country, the United States of America. That's us. And the other was the U.S. Constitution, released September 17th, 1787, to organize that country, and that was that. Americans had no more need to protest or rebel because their new government secured their God-given right to pursue happiness. Sometimes they had to perfect their union, but basically they rode off into the sunset toward a manifest destiny of continental and then global greatness. Well, of course, in Trump's speech, not only did we protest King George III's taxes and regulations, but we had to wrest control of the airports. We had to retake them from King George. Yeah, Trump got it a little wrong, and he had a lot of bluster about America's exceptional role. So exceptional that, like I said, I think we probably got the Brit satellites, too. I'm pretty sure we did. Okay, well, go to the link and read the rest of the op-ed. It's fairly interesting. And we should get on to our break now. Breaks. We don't need no stinking time clock from traditional radio to tell us when to take our breaks. Not anymore. All right. Let us go to our break. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, did you hear the one about the female late-night TV host? Well, fact is, of course, this niche of the entertainment world remains about as white and male as it was before the first bra was burned in the 60s. The new romantic comedy Late Night is a peek into this world, focusing on the imaginary Catherine Newberry, a veteran host of a long-running Tonight Show-style program whose show has become increasingly out of touch and low-rated. Think The Last Days of Letterman. Catherine is detached, coldly British, and barely knows any of her all-male writers. Responding to network pressure, she decides to hire a young woman of Indian heritage, Molly, to liven things up in the writer's room. The movie is mostly the dynamic between the eager, young, working-class Molly and the Devil Wears Prada-ish Catherine, but along the way we get drama from the white male writers, who consider her a diversity hire, a sex scandal involving Catherine and a younger male writer, which spills into the plot lines involving her marriage, and the network's plan to replace her with a young, borderline misogynistic male host. Catherine is the indefatigable Emma Thompson, who, along with Mindy Kaling's Molly, elevate Late Night from what could have been a 2-hour sitcom. Mindy Kaling also penned the screenplay, which is sharp and pointed but never mean. A strong supporting cast includes John Lithgow as Catherine's husband and Reed Scott as the frat boy in charge in the writer's room. If there's a criticism here, it would be for missed opportunities. The scenes requiring Catherine's performance function for dramatic purposes, but could have been loaded up with far better jokes. As of now, the movie Late Night is about as close as we're going to get to the real thing, but maybe it'll spark something someday in a boardroom somewhere. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. By now, it's almost common knowledge that spending time in nature is good for you. Areas with more trees tend to be less polluted, so spending time there allows you to breathe easier. Spending time outdoors has been linked with reduced blood pressure and stress, and seems to motivate people to exercise more.
So it'll come as no surprise that there's research showing that spending time in nature is good. I mean, that's been known for millennia. There's dozens of papers showing that.
University of Exeter Medical School researcher Matthew P. White.
We get this idea. Patients are coming to us and they're saying, well, doctor, how long should I spend? And the doctor's saying, I don't really know.
So White and his team decided to find out by using data collected from nearly 20,000 people in England through the Monitor of Engagement with the Natural Environment survey. And their answer? 2 hours a week. People who spent at least that much time amid nature, either all at once or totaled over several shorter visits, were more likely to report good health and psychological well-being than those with no nature exposure. Remarkably, the researchers found that less than 2 hours offered no significant benefits. So what's so special about 2 hours?
I have absolutely no idea, really. We didn't have an a priori guess at what this would be, this threshold. It emerged, and I'd be lying if I said, we'd predicted this. I don't know.
Even more noteworthy, the 2-hour benchmark applied to men and women, to older and younger folks, to people from different ethnic backgrounds, occupational groups, socioeconomic levels, and so on. Even people with long-term illnesses or disabilities benefited from time spent in nature, as long as it was at least 120 minutes per week. The study is in the journal Scientific Reports. While the findings are based on a tremendous number of people, White cautions that it's really just a correlation. Nobody knows why or how nature has this benefit, or even if the findings will stand up to more rigorous investigation.
I want to be really clear about this. This is very early stages. We're not saying everybody has to do 120. This was really to start the conversation of saying, what would a threshold look like? What research do we need to take it to the next step before doctors can have the true confidence to work with their patients? But it's certainly a starting point.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The Supreme Court has ruled that a towering 40-foot-tall Christian cross may remain on public land in Blandesburg, Maryland. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. It's hard to reconcile this recent Supreme Court decision called American Legion versus American Humanist Association with the First Amendment guaranteeing a wall of separation between church and state. The Supreme Court prior to this has consistently ruled that the Establishment Clause prohibits any governmental action that favors one religion over another. There is, however, a silver lining. The Supreme Court's ruling was narrow and based on the facts and circumstances surrounding this particular monument, which is nearly 100 years old and evocative of what the court says is the particular symbolism singular to memories of World War I. Given that, there is a strong argument to be made in the future that this Supreme Court decision is not a license for government officials to erect or maintain new religious displays. Freedom of religion, that wall of separation between church and state, is a venerable right, but it is also a vulnerable right, a right that requires our attention and vigilance if it is to remain a pillar of democracy and freedom. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1852. The great orator and abolitionist Frederick Douglass was invited to speak at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York. The speech he gave that day would go down as one of his most powerful. He asked the crowd, "Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us?" Douglass himself had been enslaved. He was crying out against the great irony of celebrating a holiday devoted to freedom in a nation that still included more than 3 million enslaved people. Toward the end of his speech, Douglass asked the audience a powerful and resounding question. He asked, "What to the American slave is your 4th of July?" I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Douglass went on to say, "Notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope." Today, the day after we celebrate our national independence, let's take time to reflect on those whose current working conditions and wages do not allow them to fully participate in the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And ask ourselves, are we part of the forces in operation fighting for these workers? Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 59 degrees Fahrenheit. We are slated for a high of 91 to 95. Eek. Will be precipitously cooler tomorrow, where we'll only get up to about 85 to 88 instead. So that is precipitous, almost a 10-degree drop. Overnight lows will be in the upper 50s to low 60s, and should be in the mid to upper 80s throughout the weekend. Winds are currently light and variable out of the south-southwest. Will be shifting out of the west-northwest in about an hour to an hour and a half, and increasing to their regular clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour, which is good because I'd much rather have wind than none. All right, so out of the north-northwest overnight, and then shifting out of the northwest tomorrow, continuing its clip at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and will be remaining out of that direction and velocity over the weekend. Grass pollen is rated high. Air quality index is good, though it has jumped up to 41 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains very high at 9, so do take care if you have that number in your area. Even if you don't, take care. Barometric pressure is, well, it's falling right now, though it's supposed to be rising, I guess, in about an hour or so. What's going on here? So, visibility is up to 10 miles. Relative humidity is at 76%, and it's supposed to be rising too. Well, we may be getting a little bit of thunderstorm activity, though there's not a whole lot of percentage forecast for that, though I can feel it. All right, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 80 degrees and sunny. Paris is 90 degrees and sunny, and they don't have a heat advisory? My gosh. Rome is 93 and sunny. The gelato is melting. Get it quick. That's right over there on the Spanish Steps. And I got to tell you, those Spanish Steps do reflect a lot of heat. Kiev is 77 and fair. Kabul is 83 and fair, but with wind. When it's fair and wind in Kabul, that means the drones don't fly, and that's when people get to have their weddings so that they don't die. Hong Kong is 82 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 70 degrees with rain. They did have a flood advisory, and they've taken that one off. Sydney, Australia is 56 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 and mostly cloudy with a wind advisory on the bay for small craft and offshore for small craft as well. And I should mention, aftershocks continue in Southern California. We had reported yesterday on a earthquake about 140 miles north of Vancouver Island in Canada. Of course, we are along the Pacific Rim, the Ring of Fire. I report these earthquakes in regions along the West Coast because I'm always curious about where it's going to pop up again. 6.5 in the shallow earthquake of only 6 miles, just 100 and so miles north of Vancouver Island. And reports of between 6.5 and 6.8 in Southern California, with aftershocks continuing. So do take care there in Southern California. Make sure you have the shutoff valve and the tool to shut off the valve for the gas. I know it's a little late, but you ought to keep one right there at the meter. And getting back to the weather, New York is 82 degrees and partly cloudy. I bet it's getting humid too. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A former police general who oversaw the bloodiest years of the Philippines' war on drugs shrugged off the killing by police of a 3-year-old girl in a sting operation, saying the world was not perfect and shit happens. That's a quote. That's what he said. Ronald De La Rosa, a senator who once led the crackdown that has killed thousands of mostly urban poor users and peddlers, and I would say, the drug is just the excuse to kill people. There could be petty disputes over personality conflicts. There could be disputes on politics. There could be disputes on owing a favor. There could be disputes on not paying a bribe. The drugs is just the excuse. Well, he said that the little girl was collateral damage and it was inevitable. And her name was Micah Lupina, and she was killed in a province near Manila. Police said she was used as a human shield by her father, a suspected drug dealer who resisted an arrest and opened fire. And the girl's mother and everybody else who saw it disputed those versions of events, saying that he was merely carrying his daughter when they opened fire and he never had a gun. We were living in an imperfect world, De La Rosa told a news conference. Yes, an imperfect world that allows murderous tyrants like Duterte to hire you to do his dirty work and then to have you elevated, I think it's an elevation, to being an elected official, a senator in your government. Yes, we do. We do live in an imperfect world.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Dahlia Scheindland of Foreign Policy brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has long compared himself to illiberal nationalists such as Trump and Bolsonaro, and strongmen who have consolidated control to stay in power, such as Viktor Orban and Erdogan. But to understand Netanyahu's ability to survive against daunting political odds he faces, such as a potential indictment for corruption and recently failed to form a government, there is a better comparison. Vučić, the president of Serbia. Netanyahu and Vučić each preside over unresolved violent conflicts in which their more powerful countries are widely viewed as the aggressors. Both began as propagandists who learned to portray their countries as victims to the world, and both later leveraged their narrative skills to drive their individual political ascents by portraying themselves simultaneously as victims and as saviors. And that strategy will not work anymore. And Ms. Scheindland spells that out very succinctly and comprehensively. So do go to the link provided in the show notes and links diary and finish that article. It brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on through the weekend. We'll meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.